Hello, I'm Rabbi Elton from the Great Synagogue in Sydney, and our personality today is Rav Ovadia Yosef, born in 1920 and died in 2013. Rav Ovadia Yosef was one of the most important rabbinic figures in the history of the State of Israel. He was born in Baghdad in 1920 into a poor family, although he was clearly brilliant from an early age, and that's why there was some contest between his teachers and his family as to whether he would be made to go to work to help support the family and its finances, or could remain learning in yeshiva. Of course, ultimately his teachers triumphed, and Rav Ovadia Yosef continued in education. He wrote his first commentary at the age of only 9 and continued to excel. In 1937, at the age of 17, he was asked by one of the leading rabbis of the community to give a class, a shiur, to one of the local synagogues. And that class was in the Halachic work, the legal work known as the Ben Ish Chai, written by Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, the most influential and important Halachic work of the Baghdadi Jewish community at that time. He was expected merely to read out the laws and to explain them, then to move on. Instead, Rav Ovadia argued with the laws. He brought proofs against them. He disputed them. This caused something of a scandal at the time, but was an indication of his extraordinary independent-mindedness and his great scholarship even at that very early age. He was given smicha, rabbinical ordination, at the age of 20, and then went to Cairo, where he was a teacher in the yeshiva, the local religious high school, and also a member and then head of the Cairo Bet Din, the Jewish court of the Cairo Jewish community. That was a short period in Egypt, and then he went to the land of Israel, the state of Israel, in the early 1950s. He was a dayan, a religious judge. He gained a reputation as a scholar. He was elected as chief rabbi of Tel Aviv in 1968, and then became Sephardi chief rabbi of the state of Israel in 1973. Over these years, he developed his reputation as a posek, as a legal decider who people asked questions to, and he gave them his responses. His two most important series of Sfarim, of volumes of his responsa, are Kol Yabia Omer and Yechavedat. One deals in much greater detail, the other is more of a summary of his position. But the lengthy discussions of halachic questions are really extraordinary. And one of his most distinctive features as a decider of Jewish law is his complete mastery of the entire rabbinic and halachic corpus. He could quote almost every previous authority on any question that he wished to look at. He really is an encyclopedia of all responses to a particular question, even though he comes to his own conclusion in the end. So the first distinctive feature of his career as a posek is his vast erudition. The second is his independent-mindedness, which we already spotted in his early years. The third is his inclination towards leniency. He wanted people to be able to live halachic lives, lives governed by Jewish law in a way that was reasonable and practical for them, and therefore he avoided undue stringencies which might make that difficult for them. He was not afraid to make bold decisions. For example, he supported giving land to the opponents and enemies of Israel in return for peace agreements as part of the peace process in the 1990s and later. He also ruled very clearly that Ethiopian Jews were in fact Jews according to Jewish law as understood by the rest of the Jewish world, and that enabled them to integrate into Israeli and wider Jewish society. When he died, 400,000 people attended his funeral, and that wasn't just because of his halachic prowess, but also because he became a quasi-political leader to the Jews of Mizrahi, that is to say, Jews from Arab lands and similar areas. He became their political and inspirational leader. He sought to restore their pride, which had been somewhat suppressed by an Ashkenazi secular elite in Israel since its foundation, and so he was both a religious leader and also a folk hero to Jews from that background. He left a legacy not only in terms of his scholarship, but also in terms of his family. Rav Yitzchak Yosef, his son, is the current Sephardi chief rabbi of the land of Israel. He was a giant, an extraordinary giant, who bestrode the rabbinic and the Israeli world for many decades, and he's left a legacy not only in terms of a rabbinic corpus, but also in terms of a new and regenerated pride in the Sephardi and the Mizrahi heritage within the Jewish people. Thanks for joining.